Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I have been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for OnSI every single day since August 2019, and we are continuing to move forward through yet another offseason together. As always, you can always find our 100% free, 24/7 boots on the ground content covering the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us on social media such as Facebook or Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about and break down some of General Manager James Gladstone's comments after forming the 53-man roster. Gladstone spoke at the Miller Electric Center on Wednesday about forming his first ever 53-man roster with the Jaguars, and you could tell it was a big week for the first-time general manager. It was a week where, he even himself said, he learned things this week that he can improve upon for when this happens next year. Now, this wasn't the first time he's gone through such a process. He was Les Snead's right-hand man in Los Angeles for, about a decade, if not just flatly a decade. So it's not as if he was completely foreign to the process in general. But this was his first time being the guy, quote unquote, in charge, the general manager, the guy making decisions, and, alongside Liam Cohen and Tony Boselli, each of whom it was their first time making these decisions. So it was a lot of newness, I think you could tell. And I think a lot of the transition doesn't necessarily even come with the decisions, perhaps, but comes with, in my opinion, just a simple, what it takes as people, informing these guys, who have put in months of work, dedication, etc., into their program, and telling them now that, they have to walk away. So some of the more revealing things that he talked about. When it came to Caleb Ransaw is out for the season on injured reserve. We've been, reporting for the last couple of weeks that he was likely going to end up on IR. It was one of those things that it was very clear what the situation was with him, but Gladstone became the first one to publicly kind of detail it. He said that Ransaw had a non-contact foot injury. Whether, that depends on, and I'm not going to speculate, does that mean Achilles? Does that mean Lindsfrank? I'm not sure. But it was a non-contact foot injury. And he said that they put him in a boot and hoped, a couple weeks in the boot, he'll recover and won't need the season-ending surgery. Takes the boot off. It looks like he still needs the surgery. And he noted that, there was a chance that maybe he could have came back at the very, very end of the year, but he noted it would have been at the very end. They would have had to more or less rush him back. So some clarity on Ransaw there. And it definitely, I think, it impacted how they shaped the 53-man roster. Like, for example, I'm not sure Antonio Johnson makes the roster if Ransaw is healthy. They love Ransaw. The coaching staff was giant advocates for drafting Ransaw. They like his versatility, the fact that he can play nickel, the fact that he can play safety. He has some range, athleticism, ball skills. He's a really sound and effective tackler. So I do believe that they envisioned a role for him as a rookie. And now that he's out, that's going to be on guys like Andrew Wingard, Darnell Savage, and Antonio Johnson to kind of pick up the slack in the safety room. But very clear that, when it comes to Ransaw, it's definitely disappointing, and it's definitely a blow. But, I had several fans tweet at me that, this is why they should have taken, Watts from Notre Dame. I have no opinion on that. I'm not going to act like I watch a lot of college football safeties. I'm just very bluntly. I have zero opinion on the difference between those skill sets. What I can say is I don't think the Jaguars should get dinged for a guy getting hurt in training camp. They don't have a crystal ball. They can't foresee and project these things. So, obviously a disappointing injury, but Jaguars will have to move on. When it came to the Tim Patrick trade, He noted, obviously, some of the clear reasons why they traded for him. They didn't really have his body type and his skill set in the wide receiver room. But he also said that he and Liam Cohen have both been fans of Tim Patrick from afar for some time, and that makes sense. Brad Holmes, Detroit Lions general manager, worked in Los Angeles, so there's in my opinion, sense of, okay, these guys come from kind of the same front office. It makes sense why, they would have interest in similar guys. I'm sure that Brad Holmes and James Gladstone having a pre-existing relationship also helped make this trade a little easier. But as James Gladstone noted, a big reason they wanted to get Patrick was because of what he brings off field. Now, he, of course, used the term intangibly rich, but, he's correct when he talks about, how Patrick is a guy who has been given absolutely nothing at the NFL level. He fought as an undrafted free agent. He's fought from coming back from several season-ending injuries. So he is somebody who, the receiver room was very young. De'Ami Brown was the most experienced guy entering his 5th season. Then you have Parker Washington entering his 3rd season. Brian Thomas entering his 2nd season. And, of course, Travis Hunter entering his 1st season. Tim Patrick is now in my opinion, de facto veteran leader of that room. Even if he's only barely been there. Tim Patrick is the veteran presence of the room, which I think they need with so many young guys. They need a guy who has been around, somebody who will make sure that they are doing the right things in practice, make sure they are doing the right things throughout the week, in the meeting room, etc. So I think there's obvious areas Tim Patrick can improve them on the field as a football team. His run blocking, his blocking on the screen, on the perimeters, on screens, and of course his presence as a red zone factor. But overall, I think that what he does off the field to help guide that receiver room might be even more impressive. Then there, of course, Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter, somebody who the Jaguars are clearly going to, rely on immensely this season, both offense and defense. The big question with him over the last 2 weeks is, will he be ready for week 1? Obviously, he was dealing with that upper body injury. Missed the 2nd preseason game against the Saints. Then missed joint practices against the Miami Dolphins. And then, of course, every starter sat against the Dolphins. So, you only saw him for a handful of drives this preseason. The sense and the word from the building had always been that it was precautionary and that there weren't many concerns about him for week 1. James Gladstone, put it bluntly yesterday that, he will be ready. He's back practicing, etc. So that is a big news for the Jaguars. Having Hunter available against the Panthers is certainly going to be, one of the biggest pre-week 1 wins the Jaguars are going to have. Because to me, week 1 is so important just in terms of setting the tone for the season, starting things right. Just because you start 0-1 doesn't mean anything. But, for example, the way that the Jaguars lost that game in Miami last year, the fumble, the Tyreek Hill big catch, etc., you could just feel the entire sideline get deflated. And then when they came out the next week against the Browns, you could still feel them being deflated. You could sense it before the ball was even kicked off that these guys were not mentally there that day. So I think getting to a quick start in week 1 can do a lot just for a team's psyche. And that is why I think, it's so critical that Travis Hunter, will be available. And Travis Hunter also, I thought Gladstone did a good job of explaining how, his two-way versatility helps them immensely on game day. Because, game day roster, you can have 48 players. Well, they will have 48 players, but Travis will really count as 2. Offense and defense. So they're essentially getting a free active spot on game day, which can help them, whatever they need to do, whether that's at offensive line, whether that's at running back, whether that's at defensive back, however they want to make things look on game day in terms of who's up and who's down. Travis Hunter will make things easy for them. He will give them just immense flexibility that, no other player in the NFL is able to provide to a game day roster. And it's flexibility that he provided to the 53-man roster as well. That is all we have for you guys for today. Thank you for listening to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. I'm your host, John Shipley. We'll see you next time.